There's a certain type of woman that feels almost impossible to explain. She's not the kind who always texts first, and she doesn't try to keep a man through sacrifice or constant pleasing. Sometimes, she even comes across as distant, unpredictable, and completely fine on her own. But the more men get close to her, the deeper they become drawn in. She's the kind of woman who makes a man feel like he has to prove himself. He feels the need to try harder, pursue harder, and invest more emotionally. And the dangerous part is that the more he chases her, the harder it becomes for him to walk away. According to the evolutionary psychology research of David M. Buss, men are often deeply attracted to women who create a sense of emotional and psychological challenge, not because these women are perfect, but because they are difficult to fully read, difficult to control, and unwilling to give away their entire value too quickly. This idea also appears clearly in Why Men Love Bitches, where Sherry Argoff explains that men tend to value women who maintain their own world, their own emotional center, and their own boundaries, instead of building their entire life around a relationship. And in the mystery method, attraction is not created by trying too hard to impress someone with words. It comes from creating a sense of mystery, a feeling that there is always more left to discover. In other words, what makes a woman unforgettable has never been just her appearance. It's the feeling she creates inside a man's mind. The feeling that he still hasn't fully figured her out, still hasn't completely reached the deepest part of who she is, and maybe never truly will. This video will break down the 7 core psychological traits behind that kind of attraction, the kind that makes men obsessed, emotionally invested, and willing to chase endlessly while never fully feeling like they truly have her. 1. Calmness. Calmness is one of the most powerful forms of attraction a woman can have because it doesn't just affect what men see, it affects their instinct to pursue. There are women who are incredibly beautiful, yet men quickly grow familiar with them after a short time. And then there are women who may not even stand out physically, but somehow remain unforgettable for years simply because being around them creates a feeling that is difficult to fully grasp. What creates that feeling is usually not her words, but the way she responds to life. The more emotionally reactive a woman is, the faster a man feels like he has figured her out completely. He learns what makes her happy, what makes her afraid, and most importantly, how to influence her emotions in order to keep control of the relationship. But a woman who knows how to remain calm creates a completely different experience. She does not overreact when someone becomes distant. She does not immediately panic when she senses emotional space in the relationship. And she does not lose her sense of self-worth just because a man changes his attitude toward her. That emotional stability makes men feel like they can no longer easily control how she feels. In evolutionary psychology, men are often drawn toward things that feel difficult to attain, not because they enjoy suffering or emotional chaos, but because the human mind naturally places higher value on what is not easily obtained. A woman who is too predictable can quickly create comfort and certainty. But along with that certainty, the sense of pursuit slowly disappears. A calm woman, on the other hand, creates a unique kind of psychological distance. She makes a man feel like he still has to try a little harder to truly understand her, to gain her attention, or to move deeper into her emotional world. And ironically, that feeling of never fully reaching her is exactly what makes men invest more emotionally over time. What's interesting is that true calmness is not the same as acting cold. Many women misunderstand this and believe that being attractive means being emotionally distant, quiet, or difficult to approach. But men are actually very sensitive to emotional energy. They can often sense the difference between genuine inner calm and a performance that is simply hiding insecurity. A woman who is only pretending to be cold usually carries tension in the way she communicates. She stays silent just to force a reaction. She creates distance only to gain attention. And deep down, she is still heavily controlled by the other person's emotional responses. But a truly calm woman is different. She does not need to win every conversation in order to feel valuable. She does not rush to explain herself just to be understood. She does not fight for attention, and she does not become emotionally dramatic just to keep a man from leaving. That emotional stability creates a very quiet form of power. It makes men feel like she has an inner world so complete that no one can easily enter it and manipulate it. Around this type of woman, men often become more careful with their words and actions because they instinctively understand that she is not someone who would sacrifice her self-respect just to keep a relationship alive. And that is exactly why so many men become even more drawn to this kind of woman the closer they get to her. When they realize they cannot easily control a woman emotionally, their instinct to pursue becomes even stronger. They want to know what she is thinking. They want to know whether they are truly special to her. And they feel an even stronger desire to break through the invisible distance she naturally creates. Many men quickly forget women who constantly try to keep them from leaving. But they rarely forget a woman who remains emotionally composed even when there is a possibility of losing the relationship. Because that calmness creates the feeling that her value does not depend on being chosen by someone else. In Why Men Love Bitches, Sherry Argoff discusses how men are often attracted to women who maintain their own identity, self-worth, and personal life instead of emotionally depending entirely on a man. That independence is what makes them harder to fully grasp and far more unforgettable over time. And the paradox is this: the more a man tries to control a calm woman, the more he realizes she does not fully belong to anyone. Not because she is cold or emotionless, but because she never loses control of her own emotional center. And that feeling, the feeling of never being able to completely possess her, is often what makes a man remember a woman long after the relationship itself is already over. 2. Self-sufficient energy. If calmness creates emotional distance, then self-sufficient energy creates a kind of value that men cannot easily overlook. Some women enter relationships as if they are searching for someone to save them. But other women enter love already feeling emotionally fulfilled, seeing love not as the center of their existence, but as something beautiful added to an already meaningful life. And that difference creates two completely different kinds of attraction. There is a very instinctive pattern in male psychology. Men tend to invest more deeply in things that do not fully depend on them. The more a woman makes a man the center of her entire world, the more she unintentionally weakens his instinct to pursue. Because once a man feels certain that no matter what he does, she will always stay, his mind slowly stops feeling the need to put in effort. But women with strong long-term attraction usually have a very clear world of their own. They have work, passions, personal goals, and sources of happiness that are not dependent on attention, validation, or romance. Even when they are deeply in love, their lives continue moving forward in their own rhythm instead of revolving entirely around a man. And that creates a powerful psychological effect. Men begin to feel that in order to enter this woman's life, they must bring real value into it. It is no longer the feeling of, I will automatically be chosen. Instead, it becomes the feeling that they must prove themselves worthy enough to earn a place in her world. That is why so many men are deeply attracted to women who are genuinely engaged with their own lives. not because men enjoy being neglected or challenged for the sake of difficulty, but because independence signals value. The more capable a woman is of creating joy for herself, the more she communicates that she is not emotionally desperate for someone to complete her. Sherry Argoff often emphasized that men are naturally drawn to women who maintain their own identity and emotional rhythm instead of placing their entire emotional world inside a relationship. Not because men enjoy toxic games, but because people instinctively value what does not come too easily. Many women believe that being loved means always being available, always replying immediately, always prioritizing the other person, always showing up whenever he needs attention or comfort. But in reality, what creates lasting attraction is the feeling that this woman would still have a beautiful life even if nobody were standing beside her. A man may initially be attracted to physical beauty, but what makes him invest emotionally over time is the realization that this woman does not need him in order to feel happy or complete. And ironically, that is exactly what makes him want to become the man she chooses. A woman with self-sufficient energy does not make a man feel responsible for carrying her emotional stability. Instead, she inspires him to become more mature, more grounded, and more valuable in order to keep up with her. That kind of attraction does not come from emotional dependence. It comes from inner strength that has been built slowly and solidly over time. What is interesting is that women like this rarely try to hold on to men at all costs. They do not become controlling, desperate, or willing to sacrifice their self-respect just to keep a relationship alive. And yet, that calm confidence is often what makes men fear losing them more than anyone else. Because deep inside male psychology, the most powerful obsession is usually not created by the woman who constantly needs him. It is created by the woman who could genuinely live a full and meaningful life without depending on him emotionally. And when a woman has both a strong sense of self and the ability to love without losing herself, she creates a kind of attraction that is incredibly difficult to replace. She becomes the kind of woman men do not only want to pursue, but the kind they desperately hope to keep in their lives for as long as possible. 3. Mystery. One of the things that keeps men emotionally obsessed the longest is not what they have fully obtained, but what they still cannot completely understand. Human beings are naturally drawn toward things that feel unfinished, unclear, and not fully solved. And in relationships, mystery in a woman often creates exactly that feeling. But real mystery is not what most people think it is. It is not about acting cold, quiet, or playing mind games to confuse someone. A truly mysterious woman is not performing in order to appear attractive. What makes her different is the fact that beneath her ordinary surface, there is always an inner world that has not been completely revealed. People are naturally stimulated by what psychologists call information gaps. When the brain does not have enough information to fully understand someone, it keeps returning in search of answers. And for men, this often goes far beyond simple curiosity. Over time, it can turn into prolonged fascination and eventually emotional obsession. That is why many men quickly lose interest in relationships where everything is revealed too soon. A woman who tells every detail about herself immediately can unintentionally make a man feel like he has already finished reading the book. There is nothing left to discover, nothing left to wonder about, and no space left for imagination. But women who create long-lasting attraction usually protect a certain private space very naturally. They do not rush to explain their entire past just to gain sympathy. They do not immediately expose every emotion in order to be loved faster. And they do not turn every thought in their mind into words the moment they feel it. That emotional restraint creates a very powerful psychological effect. men begin to feel that there is still so much about this woman they have not fully reached yet. A private, emotional world. A deeper layer beneath the surface. A personality that becomes harder to fully grasp the more they try to understand it. The ideas explored in the mystery method suggest that attraction is not created only through appearance or conversation skills, but also through the ability to maintain a sense of discovery during interaction. Men often invest more emotionally when they feel there is still something left to uncover. This connects directly to how the brain reacts to uncertainty. When everything becomes completely clear, emotions usually stabilize and lose intensity over time. But when there is just enough mystery, the mind keeps returning to analyze, replay moments, and search for more signals. That is why some women stay in a man's memory for years, because of only a few very small moments. It could be a difficult-to-read look, an unfinished sentence, or a calm reaction that leaves him wondering what she was truly feeling. Those unresolved details are often what keep a man mentally attached far longer than he expects. However, true mystery does not come from forcing emotional distance. Many women confuse mystery with coldness. They believe that the less emotion they show and the harder they are to approach, the more attractive they become. But men are actually very sensitive to emotional authenticity. A woman who is trying too hard to appear mysterious often feels calculated. Every silence has a strategy behind it. Every moment of distance feels intentional. And once men sense that the mystery is manufactured, the attraction slowly disappears. A truly mysterious woman is different. She is not trying to make people pay attention to her. She simply understands that emotional value does not come from revealing everything immediately in order to be loved faster. She allows people the time to naturally discover different layers of who she is, and that is what pulls men in more deeply, often without them even realizing it. Because the more they interact with her, the more they feel there is still something about her that remains beyond their complete understanding. And for men, few things create stronger emotional obsession than a woman they feel they still do not fully understand, even when they are already very close to her. 4. Boundaries. A woman can be gentle, emotionally deep, and incredibly attractive. But if she has no boundaries, that attraction will eventually be taken for granted. Because in relationships, people do not truly measure someone's value by what they say about themselves. They measure it by what that person allows themselves to tolerate. Most men are not consciously aware of this, but they feel it instinctively. The more a woman accepts everything, overlooks disrespect, and fears losing the relationship, the more a man unconsciously feels he does not need to put much effort into keeping her. Women with clear boundaries, on the other hand, create a completely different feeling from the very beginning. They do not need to raise their voice to prove their worth, but the way they respond to inconsistency, disrespect, or half-hearted behavior immediately tells a man that she is not someone who can be treated carelessly. And the important thing is this: boundaries are not about being difficult. They are not about controlling other people or creating constant tension in a relationship. Real boundaries are simply the ability to know clearly what you will accept and what you will not. It is understanding your own value deeply enough that you refuse to trade it away out of fear of loneliness or abandonment. A woman with boundaries will not try to keep a man at any cost. If she feels disrespected, she knows how to step back. If she feels unappreciated, she does not beg someone to change through tears or desperate attachment. And that clarity creates an incredibly powerful form of psychological attraction. Because when men realize a woman is capable of walking away if she is not treated properly, They stop seeing their place in her life as guaranteed. And the moment something is no longer guaranteed, people naturally begin to value it more. Sherry Argov often emphasized that men tend to respect women who protect their self-worth more than women who constantly try to please them. Not because men enjoy toxic challenges, but because people naturally value what has standards and limits. When a woman abandons all of her boundaries just to keep a relationship alive, men unconsciously feel that she places other people's value above her own. And over time, that slowly weakens attraction. But a woman with strong boundaries creates the opposite effect. She makes men feel that in order to be part of her life, they must become more mature, more thoughtful, and more intentional in the way they behave. Not because she pressures them, but because her energy naturally communicates that not everyone is allowed easy access to her world. What is interesting is that the clearer the boundaries, the stronger the attraction often becomes. Men are naturally drawn to challenge and value. They want to feel that the woman they are pursuing has standards, self-respect, and emotional depth that cannot be won over through empty words or shallow attention. That is why some men pursue a woman for a very long time, simply because she does not easily allow them to cross her emotional boundaries. Not because she is cold or arrogant, but because she understands that love cannot be built by accepting everything just to keep someone from leaving. A woman without boundaries often creates the feeling of being easy to possess. Men know that no matter how they behave, she will still remain there. And once the mind feels something is too easily obtainable, the emotional value attached to it slowly begins to fade. But a woman who protects her boundaries creates a completely different emotional experience. She makes men understand that their presence in her life is something that should be appreciated, not treated like a permanent entitlement. And this does not only increase attraction, it also changes the way men behave. Because when men stand in front of a woman with clear standards, they often unconsciously want to become a better version of themselves in order to earn her respect and approval. In male psychology, the things that require more effort to attain often become more valuable over time. Not because men enjoy difficulty itself, but because effort creates emotional investment. The harder they work for something meaningful, the more emotionally attached they become to it. That is why a woman with boundaries creates such a unique form of attraction. She does not need to control anyone. She does not need to chase anyone, and she does not need to constantly prove her value to anyone. Simply knowing how she deserves to be treated is already enough to make men see her with an entirely different level of respect. 5. Communication mastery. Many women believe their greatest source of attraction comes from beauty, emotional intensity, or the ability to make men feel deeply desired. But in reality, one of the things that pulls men in the deepest and stays in their minds the longest is the way a woman communicates. Because communication has never been just about words. It is the way she reacts to situations, the way she controls the rhythm of interaction, and the way she makes people feel in her presence. Some women do not even speak that much, yet attention naturally gravitates toward them. Not because they are trying to impress anyone, but because their communication energy creates a completely different emotional experience. A woman with true communication mastery understands the power of rhythm in interaction. She does not rush to respond immediately. She does not anxiously fill every silence with unnecessary words. And she does not keep talking simply to hold someone's attention. This is incredibly important in male psychology. Most men are more emotionally drawn to the feeling of discovery and pursuit than to complete certainty. When a woman reacts too quickly, explains too much, and constantly tries to keep the conversation alive at all costs, men quickly begin to feel like they fully control the interaction. But a woman who communicates with subtlety creates a completely different feeling. Her conversations have space. They have emotional pacing. They create anticipation. And because of that, men begin paying closer attention to every small reaction she gives. Many men are deeply attracted to women who know how to stay silent at the right moments. Not because the silence feels cold, but because it creates a psychological gap that forces them to think more. When a woman does not react in predictable ways, men begin wondering what she is thinking, what she is feeling, and whether they truly have an emotional effect on her at all. The principles explored in the mystery method suggest that attraction is not created only through beauty or surface-level charm, but through the ability to control the emotional state of interaction. People with strong attraction do not chase conversations. They guide the rhythm and emotional energy of them. And that explains why some women remain unforgettable without ever using overly seductive words. They understand how to create a feeling of just enough, close enough to create attraction, but distant enough to make someone want to move one step closer. Communication mastery also comes from knowing what to say and what not to say. An emotionally mature woman understands that not every thought needs to be expressed immediately. She does not turn every emotion into an instant reaction. She does not pour her entire emotional state into a conversation just to feel reassured or noticed. Instead, she knows when to speak, when to hold something back, and when to end a conversation naturally instead of forcing it to continue out of fear of losing connection. And that is what makes men feel drawn in so naturally. Around this type of woman, conversations always feel layered and emotionally alive, never too loud, never desperate for attention, yet somehow always leaving them wanting more. A woman who lacks emotional control in communication often reveals everything too quickly. The more afraid she is of losing someone, the more she talks. The more anxious she feels, the more she explains. And the more she tries to hold a man's attention, the more she unintentionally gives him emotional control over her. But a woman with communication mastery is completely different. She understands that attraction does not come from talking endlessly in order to be liked. It comes from making people listen, wonder, and willingly invest emotionally into every interaction with her. Interestingly, this type of woman rarely tries to dominate attention or steal the spotlight. Yet the restraint in the way she speaks is exactly what makes her unforgettable in a man's mind. Because men may quickly forget conversations that feel predictable, but they rarely forget the feeling of being around a woman who made them pay attention to every glance, every silence, and every subtle emotional shift. That kind of attraction does not come from trying to make a strong impression immediately. It comes from creating the feeling that there is always something more left to discover after every conversation. And sometimes, the silences placed at exactly the right moment can stay in a man's memory far longer than any confession of love ever could. 6. Non-attached energy. One of the things that completely changes the emotional balance in a relationship is this: who depends more on the other person in order to feel emotionally fulfilled? When someone needs love too desperately to fill the emptiness inside them, they unknowingly hand over emotional control to the other person. When a woman places her entire emotional world into a man, he slowly begins to see all of her emotional weak points. He realizes that with a little silence, a little distance, or a slight withdrawal of attention, she will begin to panic, lose emotional balance, and try to pull the connection back together herself. But there is another type of woman entirely. She still loves deeply, She still cares sincerely, and she still feels emotions intensely, but she does not make a man the emotional center of her entire life. She does not attach her entire emotional stability to another person and live in constant fear of losing them. And that creates an energy that is incredibly difficult to control. Because when men cannot find emotional weakness to manipulate, they often begin investing more themselves in order to maintain the connection with her. In psychology, people naturally value what they have personally invested time, effort, and emotion into. And this is especially true for men. When a man feels that a woman is not emotionally clingy, controlling, or panicking at the thought of losing him, he unconsciously begins to see her as higher value. What is interesting is that this type of woman is usually not emotionally cold at all. She can still be warm, loving, and emotionally available. She still makes a man feel connected and emotionally seen. But at the same time, she maintains her own life, her own rhythm, and her own emotional stability. And that is the difference between love that comes from choice and love that comes from fear. Many women believe that loving deeply means always being available, always needing the other person, and constantly proving their feelings. They believe that the more time and emotional energy they pour into a man, the stronger the relationship becomes. But in reality, the more emotionally attached someone becomes to another person, the more likely they are to slowly lose their own attraction. Because when a man feels like he has become a woman's entire world, the instinct to pursue slowly disappears. The curiosity fades. The fear of losing her disappears. And so does the emotional drive to continue investing the same level of effort. A woman with non-attached energy creates the opposite emotional experience. She makes a man feel that she is with him because she genuinely chooses to be, not because she cannot emotionally survive without him. And that difference is extremely important in male psychology. A dependent woman often loves through fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of replacement, fear of losing emotional connection. And those fears often make her overreact emotionally, lose control, and slowly lose her sense of value inside the relationship. But an emotionally self-controlled woman loves from a place of clarity. She may still feel pain when a relationship ends, but she does not allow that loss to destroy her entire sense of self. She understands that love is important, but her worth cannot depend entirely on whether someone stays. Sherry Argoff often explained that men are naturally attracted to women who maintain their own rhythm, identity, and emotional independence even while being in love. Because that makes her love feel like a conscious gift, not emotional dependency. And that is exactly why men often invest even more emotionally in women like this. They become the ones initiating texts, seeking attention, and trying harder to maintain connection. Not because they are forced to, but because they sense that if they stop trying, this woman will continue living a full and emotionally stable life without them. And for men, very few things activate the instinct to pursue more strongly than the feeling that their presence is something that must be earned and maintained, not something guaranteed unconditionally. And that paradox is exactly what creates the unique attraction of a woman who is not emotionally clingy. She does not try to keep people through emotional dependence, yet she often becomes the woman men willingly stay attached to the longest. 7. Purpose. The biggest difference between an ordinary woman and a woman a man can never forget is usually not her appearance, her communication style, or even how seductive she is. It is what her life revolves around. Many people enter love as if it is the absolute center of their existence. They place all of their emotions, energy, and sense of meaning into a relationship. When they are loved, they feel valuable. When they are abandoned, everything inside them begins to collapse. But the women who create the deepest attraction rarely live that way. They have goals of their own, a path of their own, and things they want to build in this life. They may love a man deeply, but love has never been the entirety of their identity. Even while being in a relationship, they continue growing, evolving, and pursuing the things that give their life meaning. And that creates a very unique kind of attraction. A woman who lives with purpose always creates the feeling of movement. She is not standing still, waiting to be loved. She is not turning herself into a shadow orbiting a man's emotions. She is busy living her own life, becoming a stronger version of herself, and walking toward a future she believes in. And this has a powerful effect on male psychology. Men are often deeply drawn to women who have a rich inner world and a clear direction in life. Not because these women are difficult to access, but because they make men feel like they must grow in order to walk beside them. There is a very interesting truth in attraction psychology. People are naturally drawn toward those who are fully engaged with their own lives. Because that energy communicates value, independence, and depth. The stronger a woman's sense of purpose is, the more she signals that her worth does not depend on being chosen by someone else. That is why many men remain emotionally obsessed for years with women who are deeply focused on their own growth and journey. These women create the feeling that if a man wants to remain beside them long term, he must also become more mature, more valuable, and more serious about his own life. A woman without purpose can easily turn love into the only place where she searches for self-worth. The relationship becomes the center of her emotional stability. And the moment the other person changes, her inner world begins collapsing with it. But a woman with a larger vision for her life is different. She loves deeply without losing direction. She still has places she wants to go, goals she wants to reach, and better versions of herself she still wants to become. And that is what makes men feel like this type of woman can never be completely contained inside a relationship. She does not live to belong to someone else. She belongs first to her own path, and that is exactly what makes men both fascinated and emotionally obsessed with her. Because deep inside male psychology, there is always a desire to pursue and conquer. But this type of woman creates the feeling that she is not a destination to possess. She is a journey a man must continuously grow in order to keep walking beside. And that creates a huge difference between possession and partnership. A woman with no direction in life often makes men feel like they fully control the relationship. But a woman with purpose makes men understand that she cannot be controlled in ordinary ways. A man may love her, he may stand beside her, but there will always be a feeling that there is a part of her inner world no one can completely own. And paradoxically, that is exactly what makes men love her more deeply. Because people rarely become obsessed with what they fully possess. The things that stay in our minds the longest are usually the things that feel close enough to touch, yet somehow still slightly beyond reach. A woman with purpose does not make men feel that she needs them in order to exist. Instead, she makes them feel they must become better in order not to fall behind in her journey. And that creates a type of attraction that is incredibly difficult to replace. It does not come from emotional dependence. It does not come from chasing love desperately. And it does not come from emotional games. It comes from the fact that this woman genuinely has a life that others deeply want to become part of. And when a woman lives for her vision, her growth, and her own journey, she creates the feeling that love is only one part of her world, not the entire world itself. And that is what makes men not only want to pursue her, but deeply desire to become someone special enough to walk beside her for a long time. In the end, what makes a woman unforgettable has never been just her beauty, her charm, or the way she can make a man feel something for a few fleeting moments. What truly stays in a man's mind for years is the inner value she creates within herself. It is the calmness that makes her impossible to manipulate, the self-sufficient energy that allows her to feel whole without depending on anyone else, the mystery, the boundaries, the way she communicates, and the sense of purpose that make her feel like a world no one can ever fully reach. Women like this usually are not trying desperately to be loved. They do not chase attention, and they do not reshape themselves into whatever other people want them to become. Yet, ironically, that is exactly what pulls men toward them more deeply than surface-level attraction ever could. Because a man may be attracted to beauty for a moment, but what truly obsesses him is the feeling that he never completely possessed the woman in front of him. Not because she is playing psychological games, but because she belongs to herself first. She feels deeply without losing herself inside her emotions. She loves deeply without turning love into her entire existence. She allows a man to enter her world, but she never hands over complete control of that world to anyone. And the paradox is this: the women who do not try to belong to anyone are often the women every man secretly wishes he could belong to. Because deep inside human psychology, we are always most attracted to things that carry value, depth, and a sense that they can never be fully possessed. And if you've watched all the way to the end, maybe a part of you is also searching for a deeper version of yourself. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.